Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today we're going to take a look at Jupiter's trine to Pluto. This is Jupiter in Gemini trining Pluto in Aquarius, and we're going to do so by looking back at previous Jupiter-Pluto contacts dating all the way back to 2002 and 3. You guys who watch my channel know that occasionally I like to go backward in time as a way of deepening our understanding of a current transit. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at 3 of the major Jupiter-Pluto themes that you can track both now and in these previous periods. And by looking back on them, hopefully you will be able to see some connective tissue between previous times in your life and the period that we're entering into right now. So that is our agenda for today. Before we get into it, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share your comments, stories, and reflections. We'd love to hear from you. If you have a good Jupiter-Pluto story to share, use the hashtag grabbed or email us your story grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. Just don't share anything that you don't want us to share in a future storytelling episode. You can find transcripts of any of my daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. I'm going to take you over there right now to promote a few things that we have coming up. Of course, you guys know that every month I give a new webinar. And if you go to the live talks page, you will see that this upcoming June 13th, I'm doing a talk on the 12th house, the world that we struggle to see. This is about the healing potential of the 12th house in your birth chart. We are going to be looking at the combinations of first house signs and 12th house signs and what that means when it comes to the kind of healing work that is implied by our 12th house. In July, I'll be giving a talk on Uranus and Gemini, so you can also check that out. Of course, our new programs are starting. First year course, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. Our first year course in Hellenistic Astrology begins June 16th. It is not too late to register. Check it out on the course page. And at the bottom, you'll find enrollment options, including need-based tuition. If you are someone who could use a little help to make that happen, be sure to make the course happen. Be sure to use that. And then our Horary course also begins on June 22nd. If you would like to learn more about the Horary program after today, after today's content, you will see an informational video that I have tagged on to the conclusion of today's talk so that you can learn more about Horary, see me do a Horary reading if you've never seen one before, and think about whether or not that program might be something for you. So anyway, that is our that covers our promotions for the day. If you have any questions about our programs as you're checking it out, email us info@nightlightastrology.com. All right, I'm going to put the real-time clock up, and we are going to take a look at this upcoming trine from Jupiter to Pluto. And here we are on Tuesday, May 28th, and Jupiter has entered Gemini, which means we are now officially in the trine, in the window of the trine, which is typically implied by about a 3-degree engagement range. So here is the trine between the 2 planets. That's today, but when will you be experiencing this? You'll see the exact connection between the 2 happens between Sunday, June 2nd and Monday, June 3rd. Then the 2 planets will start to separate as Jupiter moves along its merry way. And we give it about a 3-degree range of separation, and that takes Jupiter up to about June 15th before Jupiter is separated within 3 degrees. But then for the entirety of the next year, as Jupiter is in the sign of Gemini, we will see the 2 configured by a whole sign trine, which means that the themes we are going to discuss today will be active throughout the year. Now, Pluto hops into Capricorn briefly, in which case the 2 signs are not so configured between September and November. But then in November, it comes back, and Jupiter in Gemini is retrograding and will not catch Pluto by an exact trine, but the 2 remain configured by a whole sign trine, which is very important from the standpoint of ancient astrology. That whole sign trine will be in effect all the way until the month of June 2025, when Jupiter jumps into Cancer. So the exact trine window is it's imminent. It is right in front of us right now. And then we get the whole sign configuration for a year, which continues to connect the 2 areas of the zodiac in an airy manner. But the most potent connection between the 2 planets is really right in front of us. So what I want to do today is we're going to go back in time, and we're going to look at a whole bunch of different trine periods and a couple of conjunctions in between trine periods between Jupiter and Pluto as a way of refreshing on some of the themes. I'm going to share with you guys the the homework that I did, which is always how I do this. I'm just like, hey, look, go back at these periods, do a little creative writing, do a little connecting of the dots and see what you come up with. But in order to know what to look for in these previous periods, and in order to follow this exercise and get something out of it, we need to revisit some of the basic Jupiter-Pluto themes. We've already spoken about Jupiter-Pluto in a previous video, but I am going to refresh on some of the basic Jupiter-Pluto themes today so that we can have that reminder going into this exercise. So number one is about life philosophy going through a change or a significant period of transformation. Life philosophy being a Jupiterian quality, and Pluto being the agent of death and rebirth. So life philosophy, falling apart and reaching a moment of, or reaching a moment of critical transformation. Now, life philosophy is one way of looking at Jupiter, but you could also say that Jupiter is about what creates coherence in our lives. So systems or structures of moral or philosophical or intellectual order. What grants us a sense of what orients our lives, our values, the sense of direction and wholeness that is created through various aspects of our life simultaneously, which means Jupiter can be a little abstract at times because we're not always thinking about all of the different things that sort of come together to create a sense or a feeling of wholeness or a sense of living in an ordered and beautiful reality personally. So when Jupiter and Pluto get together in trines, the nice thing is that there's a kind of harmonious flowing connection between the two planets such that it's not the critical transformation or disruption of values or philosophies that resembles the crisis of, say, an opposition or even a square. The trine periods of Jupiter and Pluto tend to be about periods of integrating new things into a life philosophy or a worldview, things that Pluto doesn't want us to exclude, darker, deeper, more intense facets of reality, explorations of shadow that need to work their way into how we see the world and how we do things. So you hit these Jupiter-Pluto periods and you can think about the compass morally and spiritually going through a reorientation. You can think about philosophy and understanding transforming, who and what act as the guideposts, the spiritual guides, the teachers, how does your worldview hang together? By what does it hang together? And this is going to shift or move or transform. And it can do so rather fluidly and harmoniously during these trine periods, which is nice. So that's one Jupiter-Pluto theme. The second one is a period of fertile growth fueled by depth, power, and Plutonian change. So Jupiter, broadly speaking, everyone knows the word expansion with Jupiter. We think about things that grow and get bigger, things that are augmented or amplified. Jupiter is about what is growing in the garden. Jupiter, along with Venus, they were both planets that were associated with the conditions necessary for life in the garden to grow. Moist, warm, and it's sunny and some rain, like mix it all up and you get the conditions that allow for plants to grow and for fruit to come onto the tree of life. So Jupiter, by its nature, is often associated with growth. However, when it is in any kind of contact with Pluto, then we have that growth that is being fueled by encounters with Plutonian subject matter, depth, darkness, intensity, mystery, encounters with desire, fear, the libidinal and instinctual side of things. So we get in touch with, when we get in touch with the energies of Jupiter and Pluto, you can think about things growing, but they grow specifically with a kind of depth and power and intensity behind them. So it's periods where there's growth, but there's a kind of a current, a deep current, like a subcurrent of power and intensity. It's edgy. there's a kind of edginess that goes with it. You can also say that unlike, you know, other Plutonian dynamics where there's sort of crisis and things fall apart, there feels like there's a destructive but fertile energy, that the edge is taken off from that kind of Plutonian change because Jupiter allows things to be a little bit more uplifting and there's just a little bit more excitement behind the change. So you could also look at this as a period of Plutonian crisis, transformation, rebirthing with a more uplifting and expansive quality added to it. uh, Now, the third one that I have here is encounters with power and the shadows of power. So anytime that you have Jupiter and Pluto combined, one of the great qualities is empowerment. Whatever areas of your life Pluto and Jupiter touch together through their trine in the birth chart, like topically, the whole sign houses, there's a great feeling of empowerment coming through those topics. And that can be a wonderful thing. However, what often accompanies the experience or encounter with power is also the shadows of power. When things grow really quickly and sometimes you're not ready for change, then there can be it's like if someone hits the lottery and their life changes overnight. There's so many stories actually that have been well documented of people like really going into almost like decompensation mentally and emotionally. They don't know how to handle that kind of sudden wealth. It's so powerful that it just totally derails their life. And so there was some study that was done on the quality of life after people winning like lots of money through the lottery, and it was like almost unanimously negative. I thought that was interesting. Anyway, the idea here is that Jupiter, Pluto, things can become so powerful and so sometimes so quickly that we don't even recognize that there's going to be shadows that come with things like wealth, accomplishment, prestige, honor, and promotion and success. Also, just the degree to which we will go to be successful can be a little dark. And especially when you start experiencing sort of uninhibited or unobstructed progress, which Jupiter Pluto can definitely create, just this kind of smooth, powerful quality of growth and transformation. How everything's kind of moving in the way that we want it to, and so strong. So when those conditions are around, also, you know, the temptation to, you know, to get high on our own supply, you know, it's like just the undercurrent of ego and desire and power that comes with periods of rapid growth and change are a big part of what we explore during these periods. Also, it's about exploring what constitutes virtue, and again, almost like an examination of life philosophy and looking at the shadows of our life philosophy, and a chance to sort of purify ourselves in the way we approach or understand life as you know, cosmic citizens. It's like an opportunity to refine and develop our understanding of ourselves and the universe, especially through explorations of power. So anyway, these are all really interesting Jupiter Pluto themes. Now, what I want to do is I would like to go backward in time and I want to look at previous periods in which Jupiter and Pluto got together. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to give you some advice for what to do in terms of tracking these previous Jupiter Pluto dynamics. And I'm going to share with you what I noticed in my own chart as a sample. And also remember that if you're someone who doesn't have a great memory, sometimes journaling about that period or looking back at email receipts during that period, just kind of get refreshed on what was going on. That can really help kind of jog your memory if you're having trouble. But if you're someone who has a pretty easy time, use these Jupiter Pluto themes that I just mentioned as a starting point, and then look back and see if you can spot some of those themes and patterns around these particular periods. So I'm going to go back. We're going to look at a few conjunctions and then the trines because they're connected in a patterned way. So let me All right, so I have Taurus rising set here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to 2020. So in 2020, the two planets had come together in the sign of Capricorn, and they start in right about December of, you can see December of 2019, that the two are co-present. During that time, I was initiated into the Bhakti Yoga tradition, right as Jupiter entered Capricorn, the sign of its fall, in my ninth house of religion and spirituality. And as the two planets conjoined in April of 2020, as the pandemic was, everything was starting to happen with respect to the global pandemic. Everything was sort of like being the flood of events were all starting to be released at that time. Jupiter-Pluto in my ninth house. I had been initiated not just several months earlier, and I started to become aware of what I would just say were some of the problematic issues for me with respect to my personal spiritual religious orientation and the Bhakti Yoga community that I had just joined. So I was like, oh man, that was a tough period, because it was a moment of having to, I started to go, wait a sec, did I make a major mistake? Is this not really the right fit for me? And this was the beginning of the end. Right around this period when I started going, I think I'm not quite at home in this spiritual tradition. Jupiter-Pluto were conjoined in Capricorn, sign of its fall, in my ninth house of religion and spirituality. All right, let's go backward in time. So look at that period. Look at the whole sign house of Capricorn in your birth chart. Look at the topics. Look at what was seeding around that period of time. Of course, it's a kind of turning point for Jupiter and Pluto, but that would have been, especially with Jupiter in its fall, that would have been the potential for a new seeding based on a kind of degeneration or falling apart of something Jupiterian. Anyway, let's go back to 2015 and 16. So in 2015 and 16, we see that, here we go, Jupiter in Virgo was trining Pluto in Capricorn. This is really fascinating to me because during this period of time, so you can look, let me outline the period a little bit more in detail here. Sorry. Let's go back. So you can see that in the fall of 2015, here they are coming together. So Jupiter is trining Pluto right around the early part of October 2015. And then Jupiter's going to go forward and station in retrograde. The two are configured to each other here going into 2016. And then the two planets come together in a trine in the spring of 2016. Then they come back together one more time by June of 2016. And then Jupiter's off into Libra. So that period of 2015 to 16, I thought was really fascinating when I looked at it in my chart. Again, looking at those themes of life philosophy transforming, a period of fertile growth fueled by depth, power, and Plutonian change, encounters with power and the shadows of power. So around this time, I had just become a dad. So Jupiter's in the fifth house of children and pregnancy, literally a month or so after the Jupiter-Pluto trine between my fifth and ninth. I became a dad. My daughter Virginia was born. And I also started studying with Robert Schmidt and started committing myself to the path of practicing Hellenistic astrology. So it was a very fertile period of transforming my astrological philosophy, connecting to Pluto in the ninth house in my birth chart, and also really my entire worldview was changing because I was becoming a dad. It was a very fertile period where like my understanding, my life philosophy was completely changing. And as a way, because I was having a really hard time adapting to being a dad. My first daughter had colic really bad. And she was crying like 70% of the time. And my wife and I were just exasperated. We tried everything, and then it just went away one day. But anyway, during that time, I started leaning into Bhakti Yoga as a kind of spiritual salve, an emotional and spiritual salve for the difficulties of having become a dad. And then, of course, under the consecutive Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, after having taken initiation, I would realize that it wasn't for me. This is interesting how the topics were connected, though. And at the same time, I was also rapidly studying and just completely immersing myself in Hellenistic astrology. So those you can see the life philosophy transforming, a period of fertile growth, but it's difficult. It's fueled by the difficulties of Pluto. So look back at that 2015-16 period for the last Jupiter-Pluto trine. Now we're going to go back to another trine period. This one is Jupiter in Taurus trining Pluto in Capricorn. So a lot of the more recent ones all, of course, involve the presence of Pluto in Capricorn. Anyway, so here is 2011. The two planets come into a trine with one another in the summer of 2011. And then they back into another trine by October of 2011. And then they come back together once more in a trine by March of 2012. So this is fascinating to me because this was another very fertile period of change and transformation. During this period of time, I transformed the astrological meetup group that I was leading. So I was leading an astrological meetup group and decided after about a year of leading it to transform that meetup group into a one-year program in astrology, which is the same program that has evolved over the years that you hear me promoting on my channel. Now it's Hellenistic. Back then, it was sort of psychological and evolutionary. Anyhow, during this period of time, I decided that I was ready to be a teacher. So Jupiter in my first house, trining Pluto in the ninth, I went from facilitator to saying, okay, I'm ready to teach. The other thing that happened during this period of time was that I started teaching cooperatively with my wife, who is a double Taurus. And we started teaching together and then moved in together and launched a yoga studio together. So it was a time of great inceptions, stepping into the role of a teacher and then cooperatively teaching with my wife and launching our yoga studio together. That was all during the trine of Jupiter to Pluto from 1st to 9th. So look back at 2011 and 12. Look at the whole sign houses of Taurus and Capricorn, just like you looked at Virgo and Capricorn under the 2015-16 umbrella, and see what kinds of fertile, transformative changes were happening. Life philosophy transforming, a period of fertile growth, but fueled by Plutonian depth and intensity. And encounters with power and the shadows of power. You know, what's interesting about this is that for me to take this step, I also had to leave a yoga studio that I was working for as a manager because there was some corruption that was exposed. I was literally handed the eviction notice at the front desk during one of my first shifts. And so there were those themes were present for me during that time as well. Really, really fascinating. And also there was a big fear of moving from like, okay, I can facilitate a group to like, okay, I'm going to try teaching a class. And there was a lot of, having to step into that role with feeling sort of inadequate, which is something that I think a lot of astrologers go through when they're figuring out how to step into their career. Anyhow, let's go back in time to the next one. So if we go back to 2007, we're going to see that there was another conjunction. And I'm using the conjunctions because they come in between the periods of the trines, and I think it's fun to kind of throw them in. So this is interesting because it was in December of 2007 that the two planets briefly got together in a conjunction, very specific period of time. Now, for me, that was my 8th house. And I'm going to put it this way rather than going into the whole story because it's a little personal. But there was a death in my life of someone that I knew that happened around this time. And this is, of course, happening in my 8th house, a place associated with death. And because that death occurred I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that I did not want to continue down the path of teaching at the college level, teaching college English. I was graduating after 2 back-to-back graduate degrees in creative writing and English, and I was about to start pursuing a career like, trying to get a job at a community college, teaching English, something like that. And because of this death in my life, I absolutely knew that life was precious, that life was short, and that I needed to at least give myself a chance to pursue some of the things that I actually wanted to do. At the time, that meant moving to New York City, working for realitysandwich.com. And then that would lead to my book being published and starting my career as an astrologer. So there was a death that changed my life philosophy and led to everything I am now doing today that occurred in December of 2007. So that was a very powerful period for me. It's a very specific period. If you want to look back a little bit more broadly, you can see that Jupiter is co-present with Pluto going back in time. If you track from the entrance of Jupiter into Sag, that would be about November of 2006, all the way to about December of 2007. If you want to use that whole period, you certainly could notice something. The exact conjunction was the intense part for me in December of 2007. But anyway, all right, let's go back one more. And you can keep tracking these if you want to. I just thought, you know what, let's just go back in time and let's take it back, maybe it's like 20 years. So the oldest one was this one, and this is the period of Jupiter in Leo trining Pluto in Sagittarius. So Jupiter enters Leo in August of 2002, and then makes the trine to Pluto in Sagittarius in the 8th house in October of 2002. And then the two planets are kind of dancing back and forth, and we see them trining again. This is around July of 2003. So this is really interesting. Another period of time to look for those themes: life philosophy transforming, a period of fertile growth fueled by depth, power, Plutonian change, etc. So for me, this is happening between the 4th house and the 8th house. And the 4th house, you guys may know, is a place associated with home and family. And so during this period of time after college, I went to a Christian school. Remember, my dad was a minister. At this point in time, I decided I was going to be a youth minister, and I was the youth pastor of a Methodist church in Illinois. During the trine from Jupiter in the 4th to Pluto in the 8th, I went through a period of starting to recognize the basically that I needed to explore my faith and my spiritual orientation outside of the inherited Christian world that I grew up in. And this also was happening as my mom and dad were starting to deal with what would become the precursor to a divorce. So there was a lot of family drama going on. And I was also starting to separate myself from my Christian upbringing. And then by the end of this period, would leave my position as a youth pastor in order to go to school, graduate school for English, and started exploring with psychedelics and opening myself up to different philosophical and spiritual experiences and worldviews. So this was a period of tumultuousness insofar as my family was starting to fall apart, just the beginning of it, but it was starting to fall apart. And so was my Christian orientation. So Jupiter in the 4th trining Pluto in the 8th. Ultimately, it was a very safe and productive period. It wasn't like there was any major crisis. So that's that quality of the trine where you may not, it's sometimes hard to pick up on because it's a little smoother and it's not like some major debacle comes up like it will with, say, Jupiter opposite Pluto or Jupiter square to Pluto. You could look at those periods too. Today, I just thought we'd look at the trines and conjunctions because those periods are often quite potent. So I hope that doing this exercise was useful for you. I like to, I like to do this anytime that there's a major transit, whether it's Jupiter Uranus, or it's Jupiter trine Pluto, or it's eclipses. Tracking historical periods in which the same archetypes were at work, configured in similar ways, is a very powerful way to not only help us see the connective tissue in the tapestry of our life, the connected patterns, but also to just get our archetypal eye registering the period that we're entering into right now. So it's like we're training ourselves to be like, okay, I'm looking for you. I see you. I notice you. I feel you. So I hope that this helps you do that. I find that it's so useful to look back. It is like the reason that we lay out those Jupiter Pluto themes are so you know what to look for, because it can be like, what exactly am I? There was a lot of stuff that happened during this period or that period, perhaps. And so you're going, well, how do I pick among all the events? Look for those themes of worldview, life philosophy, the sense of what we know to be true. That's Jupiter transforming, and these periods of fertile growth and change that are fuel that kind of Plutonian depth and intensity and edginess. And then encounters with power and the shadows of power. Okay, well, I hope you have a great day today and that you found this a useful exercise. We will have more this week in the way of our monthly overview for June and horoscopes, so stay tuned for more, and we'll see you again soon. Stick around after I sign off to learn more about Horary Astrology program. The Horary course is coming up in June. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around. I'm going to tell you guys more about the upcoming Horary Astrology program, which begins later in June. And I hope that if you have never learned anything about Horary, that you will, at least in listening to this, be exposed to Horary astrology, have a little bit of an understanding of what it is. And if not now, then maybe sometime in the future, you can take time to study it. It is one of the forms of astrology that dates back to the earliest eras of astrology, the Hellenistic era, the medieval era, the early Indian period of astrology. And it is a branch of astrology that is concerned with specific predictive questions. So, for example, a horary question is usually formed in terms of a yes or no answer, and it is cast from the location of the astrologer at the time that the astrologer receives the question. So, a typical horary question might be, will I get the job? Or will we get married? Or my cat went missing, will she come back? There are applications of horary astrology that involve the location of missing items, like where is my missing pen? Or where is, I actually helped a farmer one time locate a missing bull that had gotten out of the pasture. So it's a really, really fascinating form of astrology. It's very old, and it is like the birth chart of a question, a predictive question. So again, if I receive a question from someone and it's like, will I get the job? Then I cast that chart at the time I get the question. I usually use the receipt of the email time. And then I cast a chart for that question. And there are a series of traditional techniques that have been around for a very long time, thousands of years, that are used to determine the answer to that question. So with that in mind, let me show you a chart and you can learn, see what it's like in real time. So this chart is, the question that was asked is, will my spouse keep his job? This is a woman who had some very good reason to worry that her spouse might be getting laid off. And so she wanted to know, so she could prepare herself, is he in fact going to be laid off from his job? And so when I receive that question, that's a horary question. When I receive it at 9:03 a.m. on April 10th of 2023, a little over a year ago, here in Minnetonka, Minnesota, where I live, I cast a chart that becomes the birth chart of that question. I then use a series of techniques, and that's what you're going to learn in the Horary program, are those techniques that go into answering all different kinds of questions. Questions about jobs, questions about money, questions about health, questions about marriage or relationships, questions about babies, questions about in pregnancy. I mean, you name it. And even missing pets and people and missing items. You see a lot of different approaches in Horary. And so over the course of a year, we study those approaches to different kinds of questions, and we practice with different charts of different questions, learning the techniques so that we can have this predictive tool in our kit as an astrologer. So anyway, here's a question: will spouse keep his job? In Horary, what happens is you are always looking at the planets that represent the people and aspects of the question. The person asking the question is called the querent. The querent is always given the ruler of the ascendant and usually the moon as a co-signifier of the querent. So in this case, Gemini is rising. So we're going to give Mercury to the querent and the moon. Well, we can see the moon is sitting right on the cusp of the 7th house of marriage, which shows us that the querent, the person asking the question, is indeed really concerned about their spouse. The placement of the moon gives that away because it's sitting on the cusp of the 7th, which is going to be the house of the partner. So you see little things like that. They're a little wink that you have you have a radical chart, so to speak. Now, the 7th house ruler is going to be the spouse. That's Jupiter, since Sagittarius sits on the 7th house cusp. In Horary, we use quadrant-based houses because the theory was all developed through quadrant-based house systems, which is interesting. So this is the only place in my practice that I teach from and use a quadrant-based house system, not whole sign. Anyway, it's really fascinating to look at this chart because Jupiter is going to represent the spouse. So we can see Jupiter over here, about to be conjoined by the sun. Then we look at the spouse's job. And the spouse's job is going to be the 10th house from the spouse. The 10th house from the 7th is going to be the ruler of the 4th. That's called derived houses. This is something that appears in Horary quite a bit. So if we take the spouse as house 1 and we count 1 through 10 from house 7, we get to the cusp of house 4 for the 10th from the 7th, or the spouse's job. That is the sun. So here we see that the sun, exalted sun in Aries, is about to conjoin Jupiter. This means that Jupiter is combust. And when Jupiter is combust like that so badly and the sun is about to conjoin it, that is a moment of death for Jupiter. So the job, we know that combustion from a planet like that is often implied in the charts of death, or that's a condition of debility for Jupiter at the hands of the exalted sun. And Jupiter is, of course, sitting on the 12th house cusp, which is the derived 6th from the 7th house of the spouse, a place that was associated with misfortune. So we can see that this is a very clear indication that that Jupiter is being debilitated by, burnt up by the job, and that moment that's coming of the conjunction could be positively looked at as maybe a death and rebirth of your career. But the first thing that's happening is the death. When it is a possibility built into the question that he could be one of the people that's about to be laid off at his company, and you have this kind of symbolism, this is very clearly a yes, your husband is about to be laid off because of that combustion and the upcoming combustion and conjunction from the sun. Now you might say, what about Cazimi? Doesn't the Cazimi mean like a rebirth? Yeah, but not first, right? The first thing that happens is that Jupiter is being burnt up by the sun. When the sun is the job and Jupiter is the spouse, and there is a possibility that this kind of event happens, then yes, that is exactly what happens. We can also see, if we take out the outer planets, which is something we toggle back and forth in our horary class, we take out the outer planets and we can also see that the very next thing that is going to happen is the moon, as an indicator of the flow of events, is about to trine the sun and then immediately hit Jupiter, which means that the moon is also translating the light from the sun to Jupiter. And when the sun is acting here as a malefic, burning Jupiter up, this is another sign that the flow of events is going to lead that malefic sun to eliminate Jupiter. The malefic sun only in this context because Jupiter is combust. So anyway, these are little rules of horary, and there's a ton of them, right? For every different kind of question, there are different ways of assigning planets to the parts of a question, and there are different techniques that we use to answer the question. In that case, the judgment of the chart was, it does look as though your husband is going to be laid off, and indeed, that was the outcome. Her husband was laid off within a week. So the way that I framed it in the answer was very uplifting, because I said, this is, when we see this kind of event, a Jupiter-Sun Cazimi, which we've had in the sky recently just now too, as I'm making this, that can be a sign of rebirth. So even if there's a death and a loss here of job, the opportunity for this to be a career reset is also implied by the transition of this Jupiter-Sun conjunction. And she did write to me later in the summer last year to tell me that he found a new job. So, and it was indeed a positive reset. So half of the art of horary is delivering the news. How do you deliver a predictive result without increasing someone's anxiety, in a way that's constructive? How do we take what we see and translate it for someone when the question is predictive? And there's often a lot of, people have a lot of emotion invested in the outcome. So This is a beautiful form of astrology. If you are interested in studying it, here is how to register. You go over to the website, which is nightlightastrology.com, and you are going to go to the courses page. And when you're on the courses page, you're going to click on the Horary course. You need to have a background in understanding dignities, aspects, and house meanings. And then it starts on June 22nd. At the bottom, you will find that there is need-based tuition assistance, and there are also payment plans that you can utilize, and a one-time payment saves a little bit of money. So, but if you need tuition assistance because it would be impossible for you to take the program otherwise, please be sure to check that out and come study Horary. It's an amazing, amazing form of astrology. If I could do nothing but practice Horary, I would, because it is so interesting to see the unique picture of each situation come to life in the context of a Horary reading. There's no birth chart needed for it either. It's amazing that astrology can work that way. We always think, oh, it has to work off from a birth chart. No. We can use astrology just like we use tarot cards. Cast them out at the moment a unique question comes up. Cast a chart at the moment of a question, and you have a series of techniques and approaches that can help you answer it. So that's Horary in a nutshell. I hope to see you guys there, and thanks for listening.